Calling the meeting to order.
That's what I want.
We'll start with President's
To see these
announcements.
things so I can look at them.
Everybody knows about the coronavirus. You've seen a lot about how we're trying to respond to it. And our overriding principle in everything that we're trying to do is that it's vital to keep everyone in our at-risk population as safe as possible. We've announced closures of the board meeting to the public. We are recording this meeting for later broadcast. We've suggested curtailing group events. We've implemented the national guidelines in all of our operations, and that includes social distancing, cancellation of activities involving greater than 10 people through 4/1, and we will reevaluate around the 1st of April. I want to make sure everybody hears this. There are no reported cases in the village, nor in the 3 counties that we are surrounded by. That doesn't mean there won't be one tomorrow. Today's meeting, as I indicated, is being recorded for broadcast on TVB and viewing on the POA website. We are working on live streaming future board meetings. We've got some of the equipment installed, but it didn't all arrive in time. And we'll keep everybody posted on our progress. If you have any questions or concerns that you want to share with your board, I would urge you to contact us either by email or telephone, and we will be happy to try to answer any questions you have. During this time, conditions are changing rapidly. Communication of information is vital. And if you're not on the not a Telegram subscriber, you need to sign up as soon as you can. That's how we will communicate with you. One final announcement is the April board meeting will be on April 8th and April 22nd. We'll let you know whether those will be open to the public. And we've changed the timing of that due to schedule conflicts here in the yacht club. So with that, let's get started. Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes from March 4th, 2020.
So moved.
I need a
Second.
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 Are there any corrections to the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes? Right hand. And we have 2 abstentions because they weren't here at the meeting. Okay, we're going to move to advisory committee liaison, or the coronavirus response plan. Winston's going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to reiterate what Rick just covered. Our goal here at the POA is to keep our property owners and employees safe. I want to also reiterate with the utmost of importance that advise everyone to read the telegrams and look for any updates that come from the POA's official communications chain. Yesterday afternoon, we issued our latest update on we referred to it as the COVID-19 update. It talks about how we're operating in the POA, what operations are still in functioning, and what operations we're ceasing. Basically, our decisions are based upon the latest recommendations from the CDC. If you have any questions about POA operations, please call us. Use your phone, call us, and ask about what's going on and so forth, because we meet daily, and sometimes things change by the hour as to how we handle certain situations and operations within the POA. But once again, please stay in touch. Please use read your telegrams and look for teleflashes, and stay connected to the POA that way for the latest information on these and COVID-19 situations. That's all I have to report this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Winston. We'll move on to advisory committee liaison reports.
I have government affairs
You
for
have government affairs, Pat.
Yeah.
You're sitting in for
Susan and her group. Yes. They're working on a voter initiative. They are waiting on the most recent stats from the elections office. They have most of those compiled, but they're waiting on the final details. Voter registration, continue efforts to register. They're working with TVB, and they're looking at setting up their initiatives to be published and out by the next primary, which is August the 6th. They've also been working diligently on an initiative to identify the number of volunteers and the number of volunteer hours and relating those to a volunteer cost ultimately. And that should be done by April the 1st, which is their deadline. And then they supplied me with a very interesting statistic, which has to do with the ranking of Loudoun County jurisdictions and total assessments from property taxes. Looking at Loudoun County incorporated areas, and then including Tellico Village, in that the unincorporated area of Loudoun County is generating $841,245,584 tax assessment dollars. The number 2 area in Loudoun County is Tellico Village at $433,955,392. The third highest is Lenore City at 265 plus million. The fourth highest is Loudoun County or Loudoun City at 256 million. Then Greenback at 23 million, Philadelphia at 6 million. So if you want to know the impact of what we have on this county, we have a $433,955,392 impact. And that's what they wanted to report.
Okay, any questions for Pat? Okay, moving right along. Clayton is going to talk to us about public works projects.
Waiting on the slides. Just hang on. First, we got the wellness center roof. Y'all know what else going on with that. We went up, we suspended work because of the heavy oil canning on the metal roof.
Excuse me, could you describe what oil canning is to me?
If you look, it's like a bubble under the roof, and on the flat parts of the metal, where it's laying on the roof, it just looks like a bubble in it, and it's horrible. So when I went up and seen what was going on, stopped working on it. Like the slide showed, we were working with a contractor to come up with a plan of correcting this, and reaching out to an engineering firm to help with that also.
Okay, thank you.
The yacht club, Breakwater, we are, like last meeting, Barge said that they didn't think they were a good fit for this project, so we reached out to Jim Hockey, which is the vice chair of PSAC, and he has some connections with Jacobs, so we're working with them, trying to get some people in here to look at this project, to determine what we need to do, instead of just replacing, looking to see what we need to do, if we can just change some stuff, if we need to change the entire dock, but making sure we do our due diligence and do the right thing, not just throwing money at it just to be doing something. So we're waiting on meetings to be arranged where we can get started on that.
Clayton, when do you expect that to happen?
I'm hoping next week we'll have some people in here. That's our goal, to start getting some people coming in here looking, as long as this virus thing doesn't get everybody scared to death. So moving on. On the sewer odors, I don't know if you've noticed, when you go by Davis Ferry and 444, if you go through that area, that odor is gone. We got that scrubber put in there, and that's really helped there in that area. We replaced the filters, the carbon filters at Toker Road, and working with Jacob Engineering on some different, routes to go on some of these other lift stations that we have. We have a couple others that we would like to put some kind of filtration system in, so we're looking to see if we are up to date, if there is something cheaper or better. So we're looking at that with Jacobs Engineering at this time. Coil T water storage tank, we had plans in on that. We are reviewing that, looking over it. We found some details we're working on. just making sure we got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, working on the electrical and stuff. So a lot of stuff going on to that. We have a meeting set up with Jacobs to look at some of the concerns in this plan. We're meeting with them Friday to go over those issues. Something that wasn't on there is the dog park. Me and Pat talked about it earlier. If you have not been by the ABC docks, we've started on the dog park. If it ever dry up to where we can get in there and finish it, it's gonna make them a really nice place, but we've gotta get some dry weather where we can get in there.
Trees down.
Yeah, we've got probably 60% of the trees down. So we went from the entrance down to the power lines, when the power lines go through there.
What's next? Fencing?
Well, no, we still gotta remove some trees from the power line on down to the bathroom, and then just clean up, and then get it ready for them to fence.
They're doing the fencing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just doing cleanup.
Yeah, I've been down there. It really looks great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's... Any questions for Clayton? Okay. Steve? Good point.
We have overstocked in everything, not just in water and sewer. We have in rock, you know, for sewer leaks or anything, and we have all kinds of material for water and sewer stuff ordered. And we have most of it in stock now, but we do have a bunch ordered also, to where we will be overstocked. I'm sorry.
He asked how many months' supply do you have?
About 4.
About 4.
Clayton, with the coronavirus and all, and the shortage of toilet paper, and given the type of sewer system that we have, people run out of toilet paper, they're going to probably start using things that shouldn't be put into our sewer system. So are we getting out in front of that and communicating to them to, if you have to use other type of things, please don't discard it in our sewer system?
Yeah. Like Ben said, there was an article went out yesterday.
Okay. Because it's going to happen. You know it's going to happen when it...
Yep. So, any other questions for Clayton? Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you.
Kevin, you're up.
All right, good afternoon. The non-financial indicators for the month, I just want to start off by saying February, even though it seems like it was a while ago, was a pretty nondescript month for us. It was, as you'll see, a pretty good month as far as activity in the village, which equated to hitting on the revenue front in a lot of different areas. March, you know, obviously we'll see what transpires soon, but you know, considering the amount of rain that we had in February, I was quite pleased. On the assessed lots, we're pretty much trending right at budget. We did have some improvement on suspended accounts. We did sell 13 POA lots for the month versus a budget of 4. So we're over year to date on POA lot activity. We've got basically right at plan for paying lots. We did make some improvement on open head count in the village, and I know Chris Carter is making a concerted effort with the managers to try to get some of those positions filled, but a few of them did get filled this month. On the public works side, Clayton didn't talk about it, but property transfers continue to be up, not just for the month, but year to date. We had 106 transfers versus a budget of 50. And then new home permits, year to date, we're at 28 versus a budget of 15. which also translated in the tank installation. So you'll see that on the revenue line in a minute. And then water and sewer, we have had a lot of activity above budgeted levels for water and sewer, both on the gallon side with the revenue as well as the cost. And then on golf, we did miss 425 rounds for revenue generating rounds for the month, but we remained slightly positive year to date. Again, we'll see how March plays out. We do have a little bit of slippage on the leased dock percentage, but the docks seem pretty well full. We do have some open RV activity, and I know Jessica Robb's been working the phones, calling folks that were on previous waiting lists, trying to get those RV lots leased. And then Simon continues to be favorable on his membership, both the individual and family membership. Next slide, please. So here you'll see actual revenue came in year to date at a little over 3.1 million versus a budget of roughly 3.1. So we're 74,000 favorable year to date. Expenses, we are at 3,000,001 versus a budget of 3.6. So we're almost 500,000 favorable on the expense side, and I'll talk about that as well. So right now we're sitting at year-to-date net income at 28,000, and we had budgeted a pretty large loss early in the year of 541. So right now we're at 569,000 favorable. And as you guys know from previous years, 2 months really doesn't make a trend. So we tend to fall behind, especially with stuff that's going on like today. Next slide, please. So here's just a quick breakdown of the revenue by type. You'll see there's really no variance per se that kind of comes out at you. Falls right in line with a lot of the non-financial indicators that I talked about. Next slide, please. So if we look at the individual revenue lines, assessment, we're off 7,000. Late fees were off 58,000, but that's really offset by an improvement in bad debt, and you'll see that on the expense side. What was really good to note is on the golf side, I didn't manufacture that number. We are basically right at budget, through the month of February. So again, March, I think a lot of the golf activities kind of, come and gone depending on the weather. The golf merchandise, a little bit of a miss here, but again, I think the guys were, and myself, a little bit optimistic in gating of the budget. They're certainly not overly aggressive for the year. I think they've done, especially like Casey with Tokwa, done a great job of merchandising and getting the pro shop set up in a professional manner. So I think a lot of that merchandise will catch itself up as we go further in the year. And just as a side note, every week I send them kind of ad hoc inventory counts, and so far those have gone really well. So I'm pleased with the level of commitment they are to making those internal controls matter. On the rec side, again, Simon here is favorable, driven by membership. And then water and sewer, just slightly off. And again, there's some accruals in here, but it's roughly 10,000 of that variance is due to rate, about 7,000 is due to volume, and I've got a slide on that. Installed tanks were 96,000 favorable, all driven by volume. Dock and RV, a $9,000 miss. That's all driven by the RV lease percentage. ACC permit, the permit activity continued to be strong, so we're favorable 29,000. CAF fees, same thing. Another kind of sensitive area, Simon and Mitzi on the food service line. Even with everything year to date, they had a strong January because of the wedding and New Year's Eve, and then February. And then other is just kind of a mix of all different fees that have run favorable. So overall, our revenue is 74,000 favorable year-to-date. Next slide, please, Shannon. This is just a graphical representation of kind of where we're at, revenue and expense. Obviously, we're trending very favorably so far, and we'll continue to watch that in March and the next few months. Next slide, please. Now, on the expense side, maintenance has been a category that I think we've historically been overly aggressive about how quickly, with weather and everything else, we can get to projects. We have done a lot of maintenance that has been indoors. So obviously the activity of refreshing, the yacht club here. Simon has about $30,000 of expense related to the pool. So he put the epoxy down on the deck, painted the inside walls and the interior. There was some CB tree, CB is the name of the company, the vendor, some tree removal. I'm not positive if that relates to the dog park activity, but that was a significant item coming through on land. So a lot of, kind of interior stuff going on in the village. The favorability on the salary and benefits is really driven by the open head count. The bad debt improvement is what I referred to earlier. Operating supplies, that's really just timing like we normally see in the beginning of the year. And then, we've got higher expenses on the tank installation cost of service, again, driven by volume. The favorability and depreciation expense, that's really driven by, right now we've got, until Jeff and folks kind of finalize the final punch list on the clubhouses, they're sitting in work in process. So once that gets moved into the fixed asset, it'll begin depreciating. So there'll be some permanent favorability on that line. And then all the other line items, we've got some favorability on golf merchandise, as you'd expect with not having the revenue there. So overall, our expenses were roughly 500,000 favorable year to date. Next slide, please. And this just kind of shows you, where we're at. Obviously, on the net income side, we expected to have a loss the first few months. We started out January and February pretty well. I do have a feeling March, though, we'll kind of have a little bit of a correction, but certainly not, hopefully, a huge extent. And then obviously, May coming along with that. Next slide, please. This just kind of gives you a preview of the year-to-date net income broken out by the different areas. And you can see in the variance column, it's really across the board that folks have done a great job through February. So there's not one particular area that kind of strikes. I'm really pleased with food, but that's really how the $570,000 variance breaks out. Next slide, please. This just gives you a real high-level rate volume on the water and sewer, both the revenue and the cost of service. Again, like I mentioned in January, I always accrue based on adjusting for days the water and sewer activity from the previous month on the cost of service. When I go through all the TAS and LUB bills, I'll accrue the current month, it reverses, and then we get the actual bill through AP. So as time goes along, that accrual gets more stable as our water and sewer activity in the village kind of normalizes throughout the season. But my February accrual was very similar to January. So both water and sewer continue to be, highly utilized in the village. Next slide, please. This just gives you a walk from the budget down to the year-to-date actuals, both for water and sewer and installed tanks. So you can see where a lot of the rate variances come through, both on the revenue and cost of sales. The volume comes through, as well as we had slightly lower warranty activity, which that will most likely correct itself going forward. But that warranty revenue matches warranty expense, so it's really net income neutral. And then the 13 additional tanks really drove the main variance on the installed tanks. A little bit of kind of rate fluctuation on the installed tanks, but it tends to do that when we've got a low number of installed tanks in the base. So that'll tend to normalize itself as well. Next slide, please. So here is the breakout of the golf P&Ls by club. And right now I think all three of them are doing well. The rounds, right now I don't see any major issue when I look at the individual rounds by rate type. I've got the rounds report that Adam and I put together for the month, but he and I also look at the underlying rate types compared to what was budgeted. And I'm pleased to note that there's no big surprises in the underlying assumptions on the budget. Next slide, please. So I'll work with Adam to come up with more of a condensed round report. But the member rounds compared to budget, you'll see year to date, Tokwa is 248 rounds above budget. Most of that's driven by the unlimited. And Tenasseee is at 179 rounds above. Again, that's mostly driven by the unlimited after 2. Kahiti, 279 rounds, only 100 well, when you count both, it's 256 out of the 276 is unlimited. So the member rounds were favorable 706, and again, 698 of that is unlimited. So I think we're really, kind of holding our own, if you will, on the unlimited memberships for members, but we really are making it up on the next slide, Shannon, please. Thank you. The guest rounds, particularly at Kahiti, are 166 rounds favorable year to date. 147 of that is at Kahiti. And then cart rounds are also favorable. So to a certain extent, I think the kind of muddy conditions and the weather have helped on the cart riding percentage. Because our total cart rounds were favorable, 260 cart rounds. Next slide, please. So here, this really kind of summarizes it by club. We're 871 rounds on a consolidated basis favorable. Again, that's mostly unlimited, which is kind of non-revenue generating, but we didn't really have a significant miss on the other revenue generating rounds. So hence the kind of holding our own at budget for overall golf revenue. Next slide, please. And then here is really Simon's 102 memberships favorable on the family side and 66 favorable on the individual. So he did have a strong January, February in membership. Not sure how March will play out. He mentioned the other day that there may be, some folks wanting to put their membership on hold till everything kind of passes health-wise in the village, but we'll see how that works out. But right now, through February, rec looks strong. Next slide, please. Before I hand it over to Parker, any questions on the financials? Yes, sir.
On your inventory, on the balance sheet, the classification called miscellaneous clearing for $139,000 and construction materials for $222,000. What's in those accounts?
The construction materials are the public works materials that Clayton had referred to, Steve. So I think it's like PVC pipes, gravel, kind of the normal inventory. The horticultural inventory, you'll notice on the balance sheet, was taken to zero. That was a little bit favorable to what we had budgeted for that adjustment, but all that inventory has been taken off the balance sheet and flushed through their P&Ls.
Okay, what's in the miscellaneous clearing inventory balance of $139,000?
That I need to follow up and get you an answer on.
Okay, last question. With Clayton saying he's got 4 months worth of inventory for his roads, his water, and his sewer system, the construction material balance is actually down $13,000 from the comparable period. So, does that mean we always carry 4 months, or have we built up?
Do we always, so when you look at, Steve, I'm going to turn around and kind of paraphrase your question. So when you look at our inventory, Public Works inventory balance as of the end of February, and compare that to the ending inventory that we had at the end of February of last year, your statement about carrying roughly 4 months of inventory, do you do that every year? Because it would seem like your last year's balance was high as well.
We have overstocked just recently.
Yeah. And we can trace.
But you tend to build up every year.
Yes, yes, we do, but we have built up even more just within the last little year.
Yeah, we've got to just building up inventory. We knew, when they first started, the fire started, we started building up our inventory.
Did you hear that, Steve?
Let me paraphrase. I think what I heard is basically we're at the same place building up this year as last year in February.
Correct. And I don't obviously have it with me, but I've got a full inventory listing for all of those balances, both for February as well as prior year. So I could do a quick compare and kind of show where the variances are.
You know, my concern is with the same level of inventory this February month end versus last February month end, if there were to be a supply chain interruption in some of our key items we need to maintain water and sewer, should we not have even more inventory at this point in time, considering what we're seeing with the economic situation?
I thought I heard what they said is that they have ramped up since February to assume.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Bruce. Steve, the one thing that Bruce pointed out, which, you know, we've processed everything through AP that we had through the end of February. So if Clayton ordered some additional inventory, it would still be theoretically in transit because it would get booked in the month of March and get reflected in my March month-end inventory.
I understand, so I want to ask a question. Would you take a hard look at your inventory and spare part for water and sewer based under the current conditions and possible disruptions in supply chain to make sure we got plenty on hand or on order?
Yeah.
Will do.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kevin? Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Okay, well, in addition to worrying about coronavirus and the impacts thereof, we have had a lot of other things going on in finance organization. Of course, you all know the budget books have been printed and distributed. They're on the website now. Actually sold a couple of them to property owners and have just a handful left. I've gotten a good start on balance sheet projections, not quite complete. I think tomorrow and Friday I'll have a window where I can carve out some time to possibly get that finished, and that will be given to you as a supplement to the budget books. At the last meeting, we reviewed minimum insurance requirements for contractors. Those were approved at the March 4th board meeting, and we're now in the process of reviewing contractors' certificates of insurance. Make sure we've got their most current ones. We found that a couple of them were out of date, and we're getting those replaced. In any event, we'll be following up to ensure compliance with the new requirements. And in fact, I've already started requesting department heads to include COIs as part of the funding requests for capital projects and major maintenance. So if we've got insurance coverage issues, we'd like to identify those sooner rather than later. A reminder, though, that the contractor can bid on a project even if they don't meet the requirements that we set for that project, but with the understanding that they will have to come into compliance before a contract would be executed. So that's just now starting. It'll take a little while to work through all that, but we've got a pretty good start on it. And also I'll find a section to formally incorporate that into the TVPOA purchasing policies and procedures manual. And I'll get that back to you for approval shortly. Speaking of insurance, this is renewal time of year for all of TVPOA's property, liability, workers' comp, and other insurance policies. Our contract year runs April 1 to April 1. And I had hoped to have something to review with you today, but I don't. As recently as yesterday, I had hopes of having something in hand. But unfortunately, the main part of our coverage, which is via TIS Insurance Agency, and specifically from, well, this past year was New Hampshire Insurance Company is the primary carrier for most of our property and liability coverage. They have not come through yet. Indications that I've gotten, though, as a best guess, is we probably are looking at an increase on that part of our coverage. Don't have a percentage to guess at yet, but we probably can't expect an increase on property and liability, even though we've had a good year. I mean, we didn't have major claims and damage to our own track record, but it's industry-wide they're seeing those kinds of increases. On the bright side, though, I'm expecting either flat or declining workers' comp coverage or workers' comp premiums. We had a good year in terms of workers' comp experience, so the experience mod is improving and those premiums should go down. I do know already that directors and officers and EPLI insurance will be flat. That's under a 3-year contract, so the same premium as we paid this past year. I also know, and these are different carriers, that's why some of them come in early, some of them a little later. Volunteer accident is flat. Employee travel is flat. Those are not big dollar amounts, but at least directionally they're pretty good news. And as an offset, albeit not a huge one, a little less than $1,000, we are canceling the drone policy and grounding the drones. That was done with a heavy heart, but the carrier this time around required an FAA license and certification for the operators. And that was just cost and time prohibitive to get for the amount of time that we use the drone. If we need a drone, we'll hire one out. And so in any event, going forward, the drone policy will be canceled. I'll have a summary for you soon. If I can get it out to you by email, I will. Likely will be by the end of the month. Well, it'll have to be by the end of the month and before the next board meeting. Okay, next slide, if you would, please. Most of you are aware that we canceled the Finance Advisory Committee meeting last Friday. Reason being, we had a very light agenda and nothing particularly urgent that required action of the committee. We did take email votes, all 3 in the affirmative, to approve the January and February minutes, and also to approve on this project, which is the Kahidi bunker improvement plan, recommended funding from the R&M Reserve Fund. So Finance Committee did vote by email to recommend that approval. Golf Advisory Committee had earlier approved the project and recommended it. So the gist of it is a $45,000 budget this year. It is a multi-year project going forward for the next several years. This year's request is for $35,000. That's a combination of outside labor and sod. That's from a company called A Little Bit of Everything, and supplemented with internal TVPOA labor. So we'll start as soon as things dry out enough to move some dirt around without sinking into the mud. The multi-year plan is that we'll first remove 33 original bunkers. We'll do that mostly in-house, and then use outside help to do some reshaping and sodding. We'll do probably the remaining roughly 30 bunkers the following year, and doing 15 this year, 18 next year. That's a total of 33 bunkers to be removed, and then in the 4 years thereafter, we'll renovate the remaining 60 bunkers. Misstated that. We'll get the old bunkers out at the beginning of that period so as to save on labor and general maintenance going forward. Timing, of course, is weather dependent. A little bit of everything has done some previous dirt work and shaping for us on Tenasseee and Tokwa, so they're well qualified and we're comfortable working with them. This project is within Winston's approval authority. It is within budget, but I do need to ask that you entertain a motion to approve funding of this project from the R&M Reserve Fund, which is as budgeted.
Okay, I need a motion to approve funding for the Phase 1 Kahidi Bunker Improvement Plan from the R&M Reserve Fund. Second. Discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next project, capital project funding request for replacing the cloud-based point-of-sale system with Aloha. The current point-of-sale system at Kahidi is not adequate to the task, creates a lot of work for the staff just to keep up and provide best possible service. Aloha is the system that we use elsewhere in food services, including the Yacht Club, Tokwa, and Tenasseee. So we'll have one platform across all 4 food service operations. That creates consistency and maintenance advantages and others. There is only one bid and one supplier of this system, that being Hospitality Control Solutions. They came in at $12,450, just a few $100s higher than budget. So this one's within budget, within the CEO's approval authority. No further approvals are required, but we'll be happy to answer questions if there are any.
I have a question. Mitzi, this is the system that we discussed last year that would replace this sudden surge of customers, people finishing golf or entering or ending a presentation, walking in, getting food, drink, whatever, and that system wouldn't keep up with it, and they were having to issue chits or cards that somehow miraculously in some cases disappeared or whatever. That's this system? Okay.
This also, is consistent with what we use at Tenasseee, Tokwa, and the Yacht Club. I think Parker mentioned that. But we have allowed the staff to go to those other locations and actually go ahead and do training on this equipment. So we'll be ready, we'll pull the trigger.
Okay, thank you.
Since this is the same manufacturer, we have the ability to individual systems that are adequate.
Yeah, we would keep them all separated, and that is also at the suggestion of the auditing team that came out and audited with AWE. And, you know, Andy's systems, we can pull those reports at any time, but it would definitely be separated per
So
location.
capacity to consolidate the three systems.
So it's actually full, and we use it at the yacht club as well.
So would you have the ability to
I'll
consolidate?
reach out to Shelley on that and see, but at this time, we do keep them separated, but I'll certainly reach out to Shelley if you wanted to see it all bundled into one. She's been pretty helpful with formatting reports for us in the past.
Yeah, not that I want it, it's just that functionality should be available if we want it.
Okay, I'll find out.
Usually if you have the details for 4 separate operations, it is possible to add them together and, you know, just have to write the reports probably to generate that. Okay, moving on then. This is the capital plan project variances through today's board meeting, including the 2 projects that we just reviewed, being the Kahiti Bunker projects and the Aloha point of sale system. For projects authorized to date, we are roughly $24,000 favorable to budget, favorable to plan. There's some pluses and minuses, as you might expect, scattered up and down the line. The biggest of the favorable variances is one that we looked at today, that being the Kahiti bunker removal and renovations project. At the moment, at least $10,000 under budget, but we'll see where we finally end up once the project is executed. So at this point in the year, we've approved approximately 17% of the capital plan, and we're about 5% under budget for projects approved to date. Okay, then carrying that on into check on cash flows. As Kevin mentioned, it's too early to hang your hat on a trend, but I'd rather be off to this kind of start than to be off, starting out in the red and trying to catch up through the rest of the year. Net income showing a very strong favorable variance. We've already reviewed the reasons for that. A little bit of variance on depreciation and capital expenditures, pretty well offsetting that $24,000. So for now, net cash flow looks good, but still early in the year and more to come. Certainly the impact of the coronavirus and the economic ripple effects of that throughout both the country and the village is yet to be determined. Hope it will be shorter rather than longer, but that's something no one knows. And I think all operations will be taking steps to make sure that we manage through this as best we can. We always do. Questions?
Can we go out on a limb and make a projection on what the impact to our operations would be if we were to shut down the restaurants? I mean, our income, for example, for rec and golf and whatnot would be. So I think we need to start making some projections like that so we'll be prepared for it. So could you start taking a look at, if we have to shut the restaurants down, what's the impact? If you have to shut down rec, what's the impact? What if you have to shut down golf, what's the impact? Now, I don't know that we could get to that point, but we probably need to take some what if looks.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Parker?
I think I heard Steve.
Following up on Bruce's comments, when it's about anything you put together, the agency plan, and is that what if only we can have, what's the actual of the light corresponding number?
Okay. Can you repeat what you said? I think I heard.
At the back part.
You're asking about cash flow, Steve?
No, I'm suggesting suggesting put a contingency plan, and a financial contingency plan versus your current budget. You need to have a contingency budget.
Given
Says,
the
what
impact.
if- Badly, if you want to cut everything down, what are your assumptions and what are the cash flows?
Stop. We need to change. We're out of time. Tim, go ahead and change up. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, or just a comment. A lot of times when we're faced with these type of emergencies, whether it's personal or in our corporate lives or today in the POA, you can look at this and, oh, woe is me, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then you start reacting and whatever. But right now, I think what Steve just asked is we're now at a place that we haven't been before, and we're at a place that we can plan for a worst case scenario that we have not yet seen, which could be next year, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is. But now we've experienced something we've not experienced before, and with just a little bit more effort, we can then find out or plan for this future event that we hope we never see. We may come one day to shut down everything. Who knows?
Other comments or questions? Thanks, Parker.
My turn again. Okay. Last month, just as a brief overview, I came before the board, gave some background on the Dock Advisory Committee, requesting to be recognized as a formal advisory committee, which right now their status is somewhat secondary, working through PSAC, advising to them, then they advise to the board. Just a general overview, the docks currently generate over $500,000 in fees. Their expenses to their budget and that by the end of the year are typically in the range of $285,000 to $300,000, which generates about $185,000 to $200,000 in revenue back to the POA. We worked through this last month, and just to make clear, as some of our discussions we had this morning, this is a group that is currently in place with their 7 members that are just transitioning their name operation to an advisory committee. They're now called the Dock Captains Committee. They would then become the, as we've put on the board, the Marinas Advisory Committee. This is the charter. Before I go through the charter, for those that are not familiar, their general duties would be, and currently are, they evaluate plans, programs, and make recommendations at the direction of Public Works in the areas of maintenance, services, and equipment, plans for dock expansions, identification of plans, programs as appropriate for enhanced services, identifications of new sources of revenue, amending as required dock captains' job descriptions, recruiting and recommending individuals for dock captain openings, promoting and educating the community about safe boating practices and changing in laws and regulations impacting boaters. The Dock Advisory, Marinas Advisory Committee charter before you is exactly in the same format as every other advisory committee charter. And I make a recommendation to the board that we accept the current Dock Advisory Committee to an official Marinas Advisory Committee with this charter.
Are you making a motion?
I am making that motion, yes.
Do we have a second to the motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Just want to reiterate and make sure I understand. This essentially does away with the dock captains.
The dock captains become the Marinas Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're not.
Not a duplication of services.
Okay.
Yes.
Other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Right hand. I see you right in. Okay, we have a new advisory committee.
Am I still up?
Mr. President,
Yes?
are we to assume that our liaison to that will be Mr. White?
Yes.
Okay.
It's his idea, he gets to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Good group of people that are extending the life of these docks to an unbelievable level, saving us tons of money. Thanks go to them, and I'm happy to work with them.
We have a question from the audience.
We had a little discussion about this issue earlier. I see the term marina is still being used in this.
Yes.
Describe this. Could we call that Docks Advisory Committee rather than Marina Advisory Committee?
We specifically chose not to.
Chose not to.
Yes, we chose to make it marinas as opposed to docks or harbor.
Is that a?
Yeah, is there a
Is
reason?
that a problem?
Well, I thought there was, with TVA, I thought there were some specific requirements or regulations that are placed upon you if you operate as a marina, which this one we said we do not. We were just renting out dock slips and providing gasoline. But, I'm all based on that, maybe Kevin can correct me.
Yeah, the TVA requirements actually refer to a commercial marina, so it's the operation being commercial is the operative term there. In our instance, as long as we remain a private membership marina that's reserved exclusively for our members, and we retain our nonprofit status, we shouldn't be deemed to be within the TVA commercial marina requirements. But that's a good point from Parker, that we always need to be mindful of that requirement, because with commercial marina status comes a significant cost for an annual permit to TVA.
Right. And Parker, that's specifically why we rejected harbor, which was also suggested, because that connotes a commercial enterprise.
Just wanted to make sure we talked about it.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Thanks, Parker.
So I'm still up?
Yeah, talk about your fish.
Yeah, okay. All right, here's the fish story. We had a group get together. There were, well, on the POA board, there's Sue and Carla and Marty and myself. And then we got together with various community groups, including Rarity Bay, that consist of the POA, HOA, Water, Fishing Club, Cruising Club, TRDA, and then Rarity Bay. And what we did at that meeting is we had a suggestion that that group continue, but not in the size it was. There were probably average 5 people per group, and we narrowed that down to 2. David Berger and myself were sort of named as coordinators, and David has been working with setting up a meeting, which we set up for Sunday night of last Sunday. And based on the coronavirus issues, we decided not to do that. So instead, we asked the group to answer 3 questions. And the primary issue is, how can we, as this group, and each one of these groups, including the POA, keep the intensity up on the letter writing and the advocacy of our position, no matter what that strategy is, to keep that intensity up and not let it wane. And we're compiling, David and I are compiling the results of that. We'll be getting back with those folks this weekend, addressing some of the other issues that they brought out, some of the educational issues that we brought out. And I would like to issue an invitation to those people that are watching this. If there's a club or group or organization that would like any member to come speak, 10, 15 minutes is all it would take. And as long as you're meeting, we get through this coronavirus issue, then give us a call. You can reach me on the TVPOA website under board, my email, or you can look me up in the TV directory. I am listed under Patton Alice White. You can call there, and we'll be happy to respond to you. That's all I've got.
Okay, that takes us to the end of the agenda. That brings us to other topics. Does anybody have anything else they would like to discuss? Well, since there's nothing else, I will adjourn the meeting.